Today we're talking chapter 4, protected growing. A lot of times when people start farming, they don't have a lot of money. They start with is least amount of infrastructure as possible. That means growing in open fields, exposed to the wind, rain, sun, hail, all the other climate factors that are out there. When you look at your career of growing lettuce, what have been the biggest differences going from open field, meaning exposed to the elements, to undercover with your production?
The biggest difference between the two, there's a lot, but I would say definitely the yield. There's a massive difference in yield from open field and undercover. Also disease and pest. It's really the comparison between the two is so vast that it's almost laughable of like, why would I ever go back to growing out in an open field? And the only answer I have for that is because it just looks prettier.
In terms of yield, how much of a difference do you see? You said vast. Is it
50%?
okay? So big. So you're obviously
big.
doing a few things when undercover, right? Like you're protecting it from frost and cooler temperatures. You're holding in heat, so you have a microclimate. You're keeping rain off and snow and any of that. Windbreak. There's some pest exclusion depending on what type of cover you're using.
Mm-hmm.
What's the biggest factor you think that's affecting yield? Why does stuff just grow better under cover?
So what I have found, I think the biggest reason is because there's a lot less drastic change in temperature, for one. And actually, I'll back up a little bit. I'll explain this a little bit more differently. There is a lot less extreme lows and highs in a high tunnel than there is in the open field. Wind chill in December was -20. In our tunnels, under row cover, was between 30 and 40 degrees. That is a big factor in, wow, we're really controlling that. There's no wind in there. It was still. And we're talking plants here. We haven't even talked about what it's like for the people working in a tunnel versus working in the field. Like, it's a big difference. So what we're doing is it's more of a mild, can be more of a mild climate in there. There's a lot less variables of extreme highs and lows. Obviously, it can get hot in a tunnel if it's not ventilated efficiently. It's not getting heavy rains. So it's a lot more like we have netafim misters in our tunnels. It's a very gentle mist. And so the rainfall is very gentle. We're watering only when the plants need it. Where oftentimes in the open field, let's say if you get 6 hours of rain in a 24-hour time, and those roots don't have enough time to drain, that means it's locking out oxygen. Plants need oxygen. They need it to grow, and microbes need oxygen. All those guys need oxygen to grow. That is what I found. Rain is a big one, wind, and just buffering those extreme highs and lows.
So there's a scale or a curve of season extension or covers that you can look at, from wire hoops to form small low tunnels that people can throw row cover over, insect cloth over, up through fully decked out high tunnels that are automated with heating and cooling.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody's starting out without a lot of money, do you think there's going to be some investment here? So we're talking like relative investments.
Yes.
Is it worth the small cost to invest in low hoops or low tunnels? Mm-hmm. You're not walking over. They're just spanning a single bed or double bed made from bent wire. Some people make them out of conduit, those types of things. So poly low tunnels is like Curtis would call them. Is it worth that investment? Are you going to see enough bump from that versus open field in year one? So lower costs, but you're getting some production.
100%. Yes, absolutely. So we used to, before we had money to invest in cat tunnels and high tunnels, what we did is we started our lettuce transplants in January, and we planted them in the open field sometime in early February. And we still get our nights in the teens and 20s. And occasionally, it wouldn't stay like that. Like we're not Maine or Wisconsin. But what that did is we kept the row cover on. So it was getting very warm during the day. And it was also helping diffuse the really heavy rains. It was still locking out oxygen if you get a downpour. It was just diffusing the hail. So we just saw if we would plant lettuce out in the field, open field with these little quick hoops or wire hoops, row cover over that, leave it on there, we could peel it back a month later. And those lettuces were almost ready for harvest. It's pretty phenomenal. And if you're in the open field, it would have been rough. Most of the time when we have open field lettuce, because we get so much hail in March, it's just decimated. It's really tough. Pulling it off consistently. And we did the same thing in the fall. So again, what I try to do, because we start off with no money, is each year I was trying to close this growing gap, right? It was usually in June, in October, when we had no lettuce for sale because it was so hot. And then usually in November to early part of April. So those were our two big growing gaps that we were always trying to close. It was just too cold to grow in the wintertime, too hot to grow in the summer. So using row cover helped us close that winter gap where we were able, I think there was essentially 2.5, 3 months max that we did not have lettuce in the wintertime. So we didn't have lettuce in January, in February, and the first half of March. By doing open field with these row covers, it really helped us make several extra $1,000s through that wintertime. It really helped us a lot. And so that's, again, like what I've said before, this is not an all or nothing. Like I have a high tunnel, fully decked out, bells and whistles. But that's $30,000. There's no way I could have done that. But I can afford $250 in row cover at the end of my first growing season. Because I took that profit. This is why it's so important that you are profitable, because you're always investing your profits to grow healthier crops more consistently and with less energy. So this was a great way for us to do this. And then we upgraded to cat tunnels. That was a massive, like you can walk in them. It was correct. And then of course, high tunnels is the ultimate kind of end goal for all this. Just because it's fully automatic, all heated, roll up sides, just nice to have.
The nice thing about a lot of the suppliers out there now is you can baby step into this. There's a lot of options. There's way more options for cover now than there was 10 years ago. Right. So you can start with quick hoops. You can then move up to a cat tunnel. And I think you'll always be using cat tunnels, but then you could eventually go to a high tunnel.
Then from there.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. You had froze there for a minute.
Oh, no. All good.
That may be me. We've got this ice storm coming. I'm on Starlink, but this is my first ice storm with Starlink, so I'm a little unsure how this is going to come.
It's been so far so good. So
okay,
we can always kill the video if we need to.
Okay.
So yeah, so upgrading over time and moving up, I think cat tunnels are the first big step a lot of farms take. You look at somebody like Elliot Selder, he's just got a ton of cat tunnels all over, and that's not his first step, but also his end step in one. Like that's his system for what he's doing.
That's right.
And they're relatively inexpensive. And his approach has always been, hey, if I can pay for this piece of infrastructure in a season with what I'm growing in it, it makes sense. A lot of these structures, while I'm not going to say $3,000 is cheap, but in the grand scheme of things, for the amount of product you can grow on those beds,
that's right.
It's cheap.
It's cheap
at the end of the day.
It's cheap.
Cat tunnels, you can walk under them. You can cover multiple beds at one time.
Yep.
What is your experience with those? Would that be if you could start there, is that where you'd start?
Yes. And I would say there's actually two steps to this. So what we did is so in 2015 was when we nailed our 52-week a year lettuce sales production, meaning I've had lettuce since 2015, every single week of the year since. So once we dialed that in, the next year, I got my first 100-pound a week lettuce contract with a restaurant. But there was no way, but I had no way of doing that with just out with row cover in the open field. But I didn't have enough money in cash at the time because it all happened so fast. I didn't save money for this project. So what ended up happening is I figured, okay, I needed seven cat tunnels to make sure that I never missed a week and to test in early production for this grower. So I found at that time, Craigslist was the big place to buy things. I found this tubing that was just cheap, like $1 a piece. And so me and my wife, we bent and put together our own 7 first cat tunnels. They cost us about $3 each total. I bought some used plastic from a farmer who's going out of business. Like we bootstrapped. So basically we built 7 of these tunnels for about $4,000 or so. And so where I think at the time cat tunnel was around $2,000, I think. So it was like, that would be easier and faster. But at the time it was the winter time. So we had more time, but we didn't have the money. So we did that. I don't recommend doing that, but it's definitely a more cost-effective way to do it. Building these tunnels is a lot of work. So that really helped us. And we nailed 2016, we nailed every week 100 pounds of salad mix through the winter. So that was a real, like, we made cash flow. That was $8 a pound. So all of a sudden, that investment, it helped us hire our first full-time employee. But that was only possible with those cat tunnels. Like, I know our climate, there's no way that we could pull that off. Because, yeah, there's not enough stable months for us to grow in the field during the wintertime, which is just the wire quick coops. So that was a big move. So it's one of these things where once you get your system down, it's okay, what do I need to do to increase production consistency? And for us, it was cat tunnels. Now I like to buy them and build them, except I am doing this new trial where I'm building this 18-foot wide, pretty big tunnel because we want to have a little bit more space on the 2 outside edge beds, which has not been fun for us to do. But yeah, that's been a big part of our success is controlling the things that we have a hard time controlling.
Yeah, I think that's said because in a world that's variable with farming where there's so much out of your control, the more you can standardize it, if that's the right word, the more predictable it becomes and the more you can analyze results and tweak based on it. It's really hard to tweak in, say, open field conditions where temperatures are varying much more widely, where there's big rains. It's, well, did the rain affect that or was that soil fertility? Mm-hmm. Well, if you take the whole rain out and we've standardized our watering, now we know our watering's at a consistent level. We can adjust that. But if we see negative effects, we can relate it to something else. For cat tunnels, and most people, the ends aren't covered. They're just open. It's covering a few beds. There's no real climate adjustment. Do you see a big difference growing in a cat tunnel versus the bells and whistle high tunnel?
I don't see a difference in the summertime. Nope, I don't. I do. Actually, I would say, I'll back up and say I don't see any difference at all. And this is why. So in 2020, that winter, we did a trial where we planted a bed. So I did this trial. I wanted to see if we heated a high tunnel, climate controlled, to 50 degrees, could we shave off a few weeks in our DTM? Now I planted this in a bed that had low fertility. I knew it was on this edge bed. We had rebuilt it. We didn't do a soil test or amend the soil. So I knew that it wasn't the greatest fertility, but it was still going to be good. And so we planted a bed there in the high tunnel, had heat, climate controlled, automatic ventilation. And then we planted a bed of lettuce in a cat tunnel. It had row cover, but there was no heat. Same day, same week, I think. Yeah, no, it was the same day. So we were tracking both. That cat tunnel, supercharged fertility. Dialed in. And I think that was ready for harvest 2 weeks earlier. In that trial, that showed us that soil fertility trumped climate, if that makes sense. So, yeah. So for us, it was really, hey, that soil is really healthy. It's going to grow really good. It just needs to be protected from the elements.
Yeah. So it's really, I think these are all investments.
Yep.
And people need to think about, where is my production and what can cover do? Can it help me improve production or get more production, a higher yield during the seasons which I do grow?
Right.
And or can it help me extend my production window? Like you talked about, closing that gap, because where cover really pays off is in that season extension.
It does.
And a lot of farms are not necessarily in the market farm. A lot of market farmers focus on it, but farms that market farmers compete against aren't always focused on season extension. So if you can have some of these crops like lettuce when other farmers don't, your product's just that much more in demand. It's a premium price. It keeps that person being a customer just that much longer. So one other huge benefit beyond just better infield growth, higher yield, is closing that gap, like you said, getting season extension to get sales when you otherwise wouldn't have. Because if year one, you sold for 6 months and made X, now if you can sell for 9 months, assuming nothing went crazy, you're making more than X.
That's right. And that's what we've been doing ever since year one. Is we're trying to close gaps, consistent high quality produce for everything across the board. And we're trying to do this in a 40-hour production work week. So that's the other challenge that we have going for us. So oftentimes when you see infrastructure on a farm, maybe it's not because we want more production. Maybe it's because it's saved us a lot of time. And back to that, one of the things that tunnels give is that when we were open in the field, we were controlled by the weather. If it was raining, we couldn't plant. We couldn't turn over a bed, right? If it was pouring down rain and we were harvesting certain kind of greens, say arugula with the greens harvester, there's no harvesting arugula in the rain with the greens harvester. That's not going to happen. It's impossible. That tool will not work in the rain. So once we went to tunnels, not only were we getting higher yield and better looking produce, our team was a lot more comfortable. And we were never missing a planting or harvest day due to weather. So we took that problem that was out of our control. We took control of it 100%. And that was a massive move. That's why, like, when we covered the whole farm, the fall of 2019, the next year, I think our farm gross went up like $150,000 the next year. And we took away 25 beds. So we grew on less land because we had control of when we were planting, when we were harvesting, how much we were watering. Just those three areas that we could know that we now had full control over. We saw a massive increase over time of just more cash flow.
Yeah, force multiplier. If you look at some things we've hit on the series so far, potting, soil fertility, cover, they're force multipliers. They're going to enable you to get better and more relative to the inputs in.
And we're seeing things, well, we'll get into now that we've been doing the last 2 years practices that I'm like, yeah, this is why I see a 1 acre farm undercover grossing an easy $1 million a year. Because all these little things, when you multiply it across tunnels and sale, it's just every one of these small things that seem small to a grower, but they have multiple increases of production sales. I always tell
So
my team, we die. It's a death of 1,000 cuts, and we're trying to heal and solve every one of those cuts. It's the little things that, like, a lot of my team members, they'll be like, "Why are we focusing on this?" Because if you solve this one problem that happens every single week, tunnels. This is why you guys will all get pay raises, and the farm will do much, much better at the end of the season.
and it's a lot easier to protect all those cuts that you're dying from out of the rain, under cover, and
It's
also better for the employees to
terrible.
work in, like you said.
And
So,
there's a lot of them. There's so many
mhm.
of them.
So protected growing, that's chapter 4 in your book. For people that want to learn more, they can check out that book using the link below.